that the artillery and aircraft had to take out before we could move to certain spots while during the invasion. So I mean, pretty much down to the lowest person knew. We even had General Mattis came out and told us, "Hey, this is what we're doing, and this is the basic outline," without getting into specifics. So them saying that I mean, I could legit, if they're not from that area, and especially if they were troops that went over through Belarus, then down into to Ukraine, I could see them saying, "Oh yeah, we don't know where the fuck we're at," because I mean they don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of places that there's no big well-being committee and big signs that says "Welcome to Ukraine," especially for those guys. So I could see them not knowing where they're at. The other thing is that if they, the only reason I would say that they wouldn't know they weren't going into combat operations is their loadout of munitions and stuff like that, because typically the ground side and the air side, when we do on our training missions, we carry different types of munitions, to show that, okay, hey, these are practice munitions or whatnot. So if you sit there going, one day you're sitting here, you get like maybe 10 to 15 training rounds, and then like a day or two later you get a full combat load of heat or APFSD or whatever they're using and stuff like that. To me, I'd be like, okay, hey, these, we don't get these for shit. Now all of a sudden we're getting all these. Why? So I think that some of it they are playing dumb, or they just literally have not been informed by the higher ups. But I guess it would kind of also explain like a lot of this haphazard BS that's going on the ground side. That's like, oh, maybe they don't actually know what the heck is going on. The air side, I would say, is not, because of the fact that so much pre-planning has to go into airdrops and helo assaults and stuff like that. I mean, it's stupid ridiculous the amount of planning that has to go into those ones, and those are part of the main operations that they're doing. So it is kind of somewhat plausible, but if it is plausible, then that means there is a serious communication breakdown. The other thing that could go along that is, if they don't know, it's because the Russian higher command doesn't want their troops to know, hey, by the way, we're invading Ukraine, because who could say that is, you got all these conscripts that are like, oh, we're going to Ukraine now. Fuck no, I'm not going there. So that could be another issue as well.
Yeah, in regards of the current situation, again, the threat is very much persistent and tangible on the south, because again, it looks like since their initial push didn't work as they expected it to work, they resorted to basically amassing more and more and more and pushing with sheer numbers. So such huge mass of or huge force is being amassed around Kherson, because again, according to witness reports, for she was looking for from the window, it's like 1 hour if 150 vehicles moved by her. So, and this was for hours. So basically they're concentrating this huge amount of armor and eventually probably will push with this sheer force. But this probably gives also some opportunities for Ukrainian Tochkas U strikes or something like that. So we'll see how it goes.
I think
I just need to jump out. I'll be back. Probably, hopefully within the hour. So I'll be back.
I'm gonna jump out too. I'm just and I'll talk to everybody soon. I just want to say I think that the Russians are going to start using. It seems like they're going to start using the mass waves of Soviet tactics, like the Cold War planning. It seems like they're already doing that, the '70s doctrine and onwards. So we'll see how things go. Praying for Ukraine. All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one, Aaron.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Hey, Aaron. All right. One of the things that I want to bring up whenever we talk about, these troops that say that they don't know where they are, I know from personal experience, I can't really cite references for OPSEC's sake, But this is a tactic that other nations have used in the past. However, I think considering kind of where we are right now, and the way that Russia is operating, that it is a two-pronged situation. You have soldiers who don't, really know what's happening, and then you have soldiers who do know, and maybe they're not connecting. The reason why I say that is because when you look at pretty much the media and just how Putin has spoken about this whole situation, it almost sounds like they're just running a training mission, or uh, out of concern for the health of the people, and like all of this other nonsense and jargon that's being thrown around. So when you consider, how many of these soldiers may actually truly be loyal to not only the Kremlin, but just Kremlin ideology, you have to consider the fact that, that these people could be just as brainwashed, as you would expect a soldier from North Korea.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, we'll see. It's current situation, as I said, is fluid. Go ahead, Grammar.
Shit, I didn't mean to put my hand out. I don't know. Anyway, what was I saying? Sorry, I got distracted by one of the cameras. Pretty much, I was pretty much agreeing with you now. I'm trying to remember why, because I had a further point to it. But more or less, okay, this is what it was. It was connecting it to kind of like the strategy that I'm seeing behind it, sort of. The fact that they're so young, that they have they don't act like they know what they're doing. The fact that this is Ukraine and Russia, these are people who frequently have families in either or. It's like opening fire on your cousins to a lot of them, would kind of necessitate grabbing a bunch of young guys, throwing them at the bullets first. And then, because when you think about it, it's like I could see some of their more, super soldiers, quote unquote, not really, but they're more disciplined battalions. They're older soldiers, people who've been through war and stuff, following the command no matter what, whether they have to lie to them to get them to do it or whatever. But these kids, I mean, that's really kind of what it is. A lot of them are kids. I'm sure some of them don't give a shit, but just from the way they've all kind of looked and stuff, there's definitely some shame in a couple of those kids' eyes for sure. And then on top of that, the families talking about it when the whole medical students all got called up for, going to hospitals. So it kind of makes sense when you think about the possible strategy behind it, and then all the other things we've heard about.
Well, at this point, it's pick your side. When you start to look into your enemy and kind of become very compassionate, it's not gonna work good for you. So there is enemy. Enemy should be responded in the appropriate way, and then if time passes and they survive, then maybe we can move on and build something out of it. For now, it's pick your side and proceed appropriately.
Well, one other thing that, and this is going to be really something that would be actually pretty stupid, is by not informing the troops. At least they don't need to know exactly every aspect of it, but they do need to be, typically when you do operations, you've given the 5 Ws, and it can be, something that's like, hey, we're moving 20 miles to here, doing this, we're going to be here for this long, they're going to do that, whatever, basic information that you can spew out and, in literally in 2 minutes, just so that that they get the basic information. They don't need to be it's like, oh, we're doing that, exactly every aspect of the operation. So if the Russians I could see the Russians really doing that, all, not telling them at all, because if they find out that they're crossing into Ukraine and getting right into combat, I'm willing to bet that a lot of them would have been like, changing their mind on all that. So that if that right there, just like me and Patrick were talking a little bit about yesterday, with having the NCOs and the officers there, and the Russians rely too heavily on the officer corps. Their NCO corps is almost non-existent compared to how the U.S. military operates. So, it's that right there is almost tantamount to throwing your troops into the fire, and completely being wholly unprepared for whatever they might get into. And if they are doing that, that's pretty messed up on the Russian commanders. But but hey, if it helps Ukraine, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, Wolverine, just imagine rolling across a line of contact without even a basic op plan. Just down and dirty discussion of basic objectives and what's expected of your platoon or your company. I mean, I almost can't wrap my mind around that from a Western military perspective. It's almost unconscionable, because you got to keep in mind, when Americans go in, you get a basic down and dirty briefing. Even if you're doing it on short notice, you kind of have a general idea of what's expected of you, where you're going, what you're doing, and how you're going to be expected to accomplish your objectives, and sometimes even how those objectives tie into the larger picture in your area, if that matters to you. But to send guys over into a foreign country, without even telling them they're going at the extreme end, or even just, hey, we're going for a drive, we're going into Ukraine, it's going to be peacekeeping. I'm not sure. In those circumstances, I'm almost not surprised that a lot of these guys we're seeing get captured are shocked that the Ukrainians are trying to kill them.
Hey,
I agree.
So, hey, Patrick, I think what we're really hitting on here is something that many in the audience are probably aware of, but probably most people are not, of what we call mission type orders, right? And mission type
Exactly.
really have two aspects. The first one is, let's say, for example, I'm in a squad, so I know what my platoon's mission is, and then I know what my company's mission is, right? So you know the mission of the organization 2 levels up, right? And the second thing is really an aspect of modernized maneuver warfare, and that is a concept that we call commander's intent. In other words, it's the question that you ask yourself when everything else goes wrong, and I don't know where I'm going or what I'm supposed to be doing. What does the commander want me to do? And what I think is driving this is the Russian fear, or the desire to preserve operational security, so that they really only have detailed elements of the plan, like on a bigot list, for example, that only a few people actually really kind of know what's going on, and so the rank and file don't really understand what's going on, and so this is really going to hamper them. If this is what they're doing, this is really going to be something they're going to have to change. And I'm not I'm not a military analyst I'm not an expert on Russian military doctrine. Don't get me wrong. Um, but, I think that that's probably inculcated in their service cultures. And the second thing is with like the logistics tail. So here's something to think about too, right? So, um, when the infantry goes into combat, like light infantry, they'll carry like a 7-day basic load of supplies. So they should not be after 24 hours, assuming they topped off and filled up with everything before they crossed the line of departure. They should have plenty of food right now. They should. Um, and the second thing is that the heavies have got to get log pack resupply twice a day. So those logistics lines are going to have to be secured. And that's really, I'll throw this out there. I know the FSP guy's listening to me right now, and he's probably scribbling away furiously, but I'm not telling them that they know something they don't already know. You're legit. I mean, they should know this from Afghanistan. Your logistics tail, if for this type of operation, is really where your critical vulnerability is. And that's really kind of, I think that, you know, that's where you really ought to be looking.
Hoorah to that.
Well, V, I think that's exactly right. And not just from Afghanistan, but from our operations in Iraq that were highly televised, especially during the early phases of the war, where we had supply columns get hit when they got lost. or they wandered away from their security elements for whatever reason. I mean, this is basic stuff. And to your point, I mean, I am, you'll find people who have delved into Russian doctrine far deeper than I have, but this does seem to track with their notion that the enlisted are not thinkers. The officers are meant to do the thinking. The enlisted are meant to do the fighting, the dying. And if that's really the way that they've approached this in a modern battlefield, it would explain at least some of what we're seeing out of them as far as how they're operating it and failing to achieve.
Yeah, they're learning this lesson with blood and treasure, which is, I mean, that this is information age warfare, right? It's maneuver age warfare more than anything. And the battle zone is now, it's all around you. It's online. It's in the cyber domain. It's everywhere. And so this notion that only men can do certain things, that it doesn't matter. I mean, who you are, you do the job, you go out and do it. And so, but mission type orders require a level of competency that you're not necessarily going to find in conscripts. You can make up a lot of ground, like probably in the case of Ukraine, where a partisan, a revolutionary, an insurgent in this case, right? Because we're going to move towards a resistance operating concept. The Ukraine, they don't have to have a lot of training, because what they lack in training and experience, they make up for in desire.
Yeah, I'm going to give an example, and this is from 2003, so I'm not worried whoever hears it. But so the CSSB that I was with, so when we pushed north, so for our own security, we actually had 2 full MP companies, and then we had a separate security platoon, and that was the security platoon was for our internal security, and our MPs were literally doing what they would have been doing, and they were our route security guys for our battalion. Because, like I said, if our battalion, with the amount of supplies that we were carrying, if our battalion got hit, First Mardiv was going to be dead in the tracks. And the fact that these guys don't even have simple MP units out going up and down their lines of communication, that's a serious failure on their part.
And so if you're going to negate their combat power, like one of the simplest things that you can do, you don't have to hit a tank with $100,000 javelin every time in order to take the tank out. If you can remove the tank's fuel, then you can accomplish the same effect, right?
That's a very expensive pillbox.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But what do? You put out phony landmines along the route that they're going to use to resupply the tanks, and that will shut them down for hours.
Have any of y'all heard anything about Sarny up in northern Ukraine above Lutsk and Rivne, I think? It's northwest Sidomir.
Graham, would you say Sumy or Sarny?
Sarny. Yeah, Sierra, Alpha, Romeo, November, Yankee. Gosh, my brain.
Got it.
Also, apparently Kiev is still under pretty heavy ordnance, or at least the area around it.
So I haven't heard anything of Sarne. I'm trying to look for anything out of there. And again, previously there were reports that whatever was pushing from Belarus in between Zhytomyr and Rivne, apparently it was pushed back and sustained severe casualties.
Where is that at?
So again, I haven't heard anything about Sarne per se specifically. But previous reports indicate that whatever was pushing from
Belarus.
from Belarus from north to south in between Zhytomyr and Rivne, it didn't fare well. They actually attempted a couple, similar airdrops where they lost these airborne units, and then they pushed in with armor. But also, this was repelled, and they actually retreated and sustained casualties in there. But at this
It is
point,
Lukashenko's army, huh?
yeah. But at this point, I don't know what's going on around Sarne. It's like developing, I guess.
I'm kind of curious. Like, do the Russians have any airborne units left?
Yeah, I mean, as far as what they've got in inventory, yes. The Russians have an entire airborne corps of 4 divisions supported by another 3 independent brigades. So we haven't seen even a tenth of what they do have. Whether they're willing to commit it and whether it's in the area to be committed is an entirely different question.
The only reason, like, I'm sitting here thinking about it, it's like, okay, obviously they're not afraid of decimating the civilian population, they probably don't want to decimate complete cities if they don't have to. And the only thing I can think of is that they really are nervous about how many civilians not only have rifles, but have javelins, have NLAWs, that's the only thing I can think of. Because, like, we haven't seen a fraction of their air force or their air power capability. Like, I'm kind of not really confused about it, just kind of like, you would think, at least I would think, that you would go a little heavier on that, not do all this going in one border out just seeing which works, like, come on, dude.
So I see a couple of kind of worrisome reports that there are infiltrators on the ground. They actually managed to masquerade as territorial defense forces, and apparently, considering that it's pretty easy, it's pretty easy to get gun and ammo right now in Ukraine. These kind of pose a serious threat. But I see like reports that they are being neutralized and uncovered. For example, this last post from Ukrainian National Guard. They actually seized one of those saboteur units.
I'm wondering if maybe what I'm hearing that others are hearing is that it's the return fire from Ukrainian military that is taking up a lot of that they're hearing more of, not so much, helicopters and artillery from the other side, especially if they're fighting back helicopters and tanks. Like, that's some pretty heavy firepower you're throwing at them.
Well, that's one thing that sucks about when you're fighting an enemy who's using the same equipment and the same guns and ammo as you. You can't tell whose fire is who sometimes.
That's why in 2013, the way around it was Ukrainians painted 2 white stripes on every hull or every tank from front to the bottom, 2 horizontal white stripes. Russians instead painted white circle in 2013-15. And again, it was very fluid and maneuverable. Nowadays, it's Ukrainian armor usually is unmarked, and Russian armor has all these weird markings with dots and other letters and triangles. But again, there were reports earlier today that near Melitopol specifically, excuse me, the Russian unit was halted, but they were spotted, and the witness accounts were that they were dropping Russian camouflage and dressing up in Ukrainian uniform. They were wiping the insignia or tearing away the insignia and also wiping all these Russian markings from their armor. So therefore, most likely there is something brewing in or simmering in regards of some, false flag attack, uh, being framed as if it's Ukrainians perpetrating mass atrocity. So this is the threat that we are having right now as well. Well, except the frontline movements and then attacks and counterattacks.
Hey, how long is it before it's sunrise over there?
So it's
in Kiev, it's
3 a.m. almost. So
yeah.
it's 3 hours, 3+ hours, 3 hours.
I guess we'll see what happens around 05 in the morning over there.
Yeah, I was thinking we'll probably, if we're gonna see those paratroopers, I mean, I have a feeling we kind of saw them, or at least, you know, some javelins saw them. If that is who was in that, whatchamacallit, Elysian or whatever.
The IL-76.
Yes. But, I don't know, that was, I expect if they haven't tried to come through yet, it'll probably be around between 3 and 5.
Hey, Walter, I'm about to send you a DM. If you could take a look at it.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Right. I'm trying to get Peter back. I'm also reading a report from Militarny, Mil in UA. It's a credible source. Russian military dressed up as Ukrainian police approach on their vehicle. Oh, pardon. They used the police vehicle, and yeah, near Vasilkiv they shot Ukrainian checkpoint and killed a number of Ukrainian soldiers on the checkpoint because they actually masqueraded as the police unit.
Did you say it was BBC reporting that, Walter?
No, it's Militarny Portal. It's a Ukrainian source.
Very good.
Mil in UA. Mil in the _in_UA. So essentially, they used the police vehicle. They turned the, how do you call those, lights on? Not lights on, sirens on. Police sirens and flashers and everything. Approached the checkpoint, and since they were in police uniform, they managed to jump them and kill them. So again, they're trying all these, saboteur tactics and infiltration tactics. Trying to get Peter back.
Oh, hell yes.
I'm
Okay,
on it.
where
I'm on it.
you're trying to get who back?
Oh,
Peter,
by the way,
go
Real
ahead.
quick.
sorry.
No, you're fine. Hold on. Okay, so I was asking about where he heard, if it was in Kiev that he heard some really heavy, gunfire and explosions, but no, it was 50 kilometers to the east and probably 25 kilometers west, but they're being fought back very hard. Hold on one second. Pushed. Again, this is kind of like unconfirmed, but pushed way out of Kiev, or at least on that one side. So there's definitely reason to be proud of the Ukrainian military for one. That's for damn sure.
Well, I mean, we're still, I've not seen a massive push on Capitol yet, but of course it's still early in the evening here. There's still plenty of time for that to happen. I will tell you though, within the past few minutes, it's been the Ukrainian Defense Ministry has said that they have shot down a Russian transport plane, an Ilyushin 76 of those very big aircraft. And what the Defense Ministry say is that that was carrying Russian paratroopers. Now,
yeah, I was about to say that I haven't heard a lot of talk about this, but there's been multiple reports of these incidents where Russian troops allegedly take Ukrainian uniforms and pretend to be Ukrainian soldiers and then attack the Ukrainian positions. Isn't that like a war crime?
Yes, it is. It's a violation of the law of armed conflict.
Yeah, because
No.
yeah, because
information about that it should be documented. To look at the time, what exactly happened, how many people were involved, what type of vehicles they were driving, what uniforms they were wearing. I mean, as much as you can, and then, you know, if you post it to the internet, then, you know, an investigator at a later date could go ahead and track that down and find it.
yeah, because I just find it surprising that the media isn't jumping on this because, well, I think it's, well, horrendous.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of for that is that the media seems to be very focused on what civilians are doing and what military is doing and what explosions are doing in the distance behind them. I don't know, or maybe they just want to be sure before they report something like that. I also saw on one of the roads, I think it was outside of Kiev, there was it was almost for sure Russians firing upon Russians because it was after curfew and they I don't know exactly what happened, but one of them was still in a car and another group was outside of the car and they probably put on Ukrainian uniforms and confused themselves.
Blue on blue sucks.
But I just brought this thing up because if we're talking about intervention here from the West, well, if the Russian army is conducting war crimes, well, that could be a good reason to actually support Ukraine, like openly.
Openly probably is not the most savvy way, but you know, as usual, as Russia did it, everyone understands that it's Russia doing it, but you know they maintain plausible deniability. So now the same tactics should be used against them.
Oh, they will by the civilian population once they get into those urban areas.
Just trying to update myself on everything that happened the last 3 hours. So we got Ilyushin 76 downed with all the airborne troops in it, right? A couple of helicopters. What else? What was about all these power stations being attacked? How successful was that? Did they manage to cut off the electricity in Kiev or not?
That was a power station to the northeast, a hydro power station northeast of Kiev. That had been reported, but we never heard about whether it had been knocked out. I had never heard any information about it actually going down.
And obviously, power to the city is still there.
Yeah, I was looking at video out of Kiev and the I don't know if it's Maidan Square or where it's at. It's a big Y road. I don't know where that exactly is. But they were still showing that the road, it was all lit up, and the neighborhoods and stuff like that were well lit up as well.
So I have a question for the group along that lines. So, over the last 48 hours, there seems to be an almost unimpeded communication channel within the country. And I think that's actually a good thing. But, if I'm going to put my red hat on, like one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the communications infrastructure in the country, and then the power as well. If I'm really serious about doing something. So I'd love to hear if anybody has like an assessment on why they think that hasn't happened yet.
Well, I personally think that it goes back to the intelligence. I keep mentioning this point about how I think there was just bad intelligence on the ground, and then also our counterintelligence efforts. The counterintelligence efforts of Ukraine has been extremely effective. You can see this through troop movements. You can see it through air movements. There just seems to be a general disconnect between forces moving beyond Russia, and then actually what's happening with the Kremlin.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think also some of it might lead to because if Putin is trying to actually take over the whole country, him destroying those facilities would actually be detrimental for his plan if he wants to keep keep the whole of Ukraine functioning, getting rid of the leadership. So that's another reason why they might not be hitting him as bad.
That's what I thought, is that the infrastructure, at some point you're going to have to bring some semblance of services, right? Even if it's a puppet regime, right? I mean, they still have to provide, power and take out the trash and that sort of thing. And so I can understand why you would want to leave that, but I also know that there are ways to do things that are reversible. And I'm just, why haven't they done that yet? I mean, we're like live blogging this thing in real time. Like, I mean, the OPSEC is just like totally blown out the windows in terms of like unit movement goes, and where they're at.
I think it kind of goes back to that whole every freaking civilian has weapons now. I don't know. I mean, like, that's the only thing I can think of, because you're right. It is kind of like what's going on with this. I think that maybe it really is just they are just not as in good of a shape as anyone expected, including themselves.
Hey, just really quickly, Walter, I sent you a message on this as well. I'm looking for legitimate contact source for the 130th, simply because there's a lot of information that's going around on how to contact them for people that are looking to head over that direction. So if you could assist me on that.
Yeah, let me look into it 1 second.
Can I ask a quick question? One of our viewers asked, are there any verified reports of Russian troops surrendering?
Pardon?
There was that whole recon platoon.
Of them surrendering?
Wait, did they surrender or did they get captured? I forgot. It was a 27-man recon platoon.
Yeah, I know there's the recon platoon. There is, I want to say, an armored something. Not a division. Somewhere, I don't know if maybe it was like they had gotten lost or something. And then I know that they just captured some saboteurs, whatever. trying to think of more. I know there's more just off of some of the videos I've seen of them, but there's a decent amount from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think that a lot of those Russians, if they get in that situation, I think they're seeing that, it's like, hey, I'd rather surrender and then, maybe live and then potentially go home instead of, getting myself killed in a country I don't want to be in.
Hey,
Okay,
did
so
we
I
ever
just
try
wanted.
to get OSIC in? Because he's apparently still having issues getting into the space.
All right, I just wanted to level set folks that it is now just after 3:05 a.m. in Kiev, and so it's getting into the pre-dawn hours there for this new day of the conflict. I wanted to provide some group ground rules. We'll be talking about actuals as much as possible. We will ask people to hold off on theoreticals, postulation, speculation, things like that. I also want to go over some basics of OSINT best practices. Please, if you have a public link to share to myself or to any of the other speakers, just tag us in public. There's no need to send a DM to us of something that's already a public tweet. Um, if there is something that you do want us to keep confidential, we have been getting confidential DMs. That's certainly perfect, but it does take us some time to to get to that. And and then the other thing is that we will not be reporting on things like, let's say, civilian refugee movements or civilian positions. We may report upon any incident of civilian casualties, but again, we're going to try and protect the privacy and the dignity of affected populations as much as possible. We may report upon any incidents of civilian casualties, but again, we're going to try and protect the privacy and the dignity of affected populations as much as possible. Oop, okay, Chris, your mic is open, but I did bring you up to speak. So is there a question you have for us, Chris, or something that you'd like to opine on?
No, I guess you can hear me now.
Yes,
We
we can
went
hear you now.
through
Go ahead.
a lot of trouble, and on my phone it's working right now. No, I was invited earlier on this channel today to talk about the European point of view on how a NATO country is looking at the whole situation in Ukraine and how Russia is invading them, and how the rest of the world is looking at them, including most European countries. What I personally want to say about it is that nobody can save the Ukraine overnight, and they are having one of the worst nights. They're gonna have one of the worst nights going overhead. You know, this night, Russians standing at the border of Kiev and going in, and they defending themselves. It's gonna be a hard night. It's gonna be a long night for them, and I don't really know how to respond to it because well, nobody of us knows how we're gonna wake up the next morning and gonna read in the newspapers like what happened to the Ukraine. But what I do know is that we, and it's not only Europe, but it's also the Americans in 2013, we promised full support to the Ukraine. And we said, you can join NATO and you can come to the European Union. And then their president made a decision that we are still feeling today, because they made the decision like, okay, we got the support of the Americans, we got the support of Europe, and then they got a new president. Like, okay, we got all the support in, and we're gonna bully the Russians and everything. And we know what happened in 2014. Nobody in Europe did anything, and
Not particularly sure what do you mean, bully Russians. Who bullied Russians and when? Can you elaborate, please? Go ahead, Chris. I'm listening. So Chris apparently didn't want to respond. So apparently a short history lesson needs to be done. Um, Long story short, in 2014, after Russian puppet Yanukovych fled from Kiev and Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity succeeded, Russia hideously stepped us back. There was a short period when the Ukrainian army and command line was decapitated because under Yanukovych, his personal friends and Russian citizens were in charge of Ukrainian armed forces. Thus, all the problems that were stemming from it. But they fled, and Russia immediately hideously stabbed us in the back. They seized Crimea, occupied Crimea, and then they started the war in the east. Essentially, one has to remember there were no separatists in Ukraine to begin with. These were Russian special forces implanted initially in the spring of 2014. Then they were supported further by Russian battalion tactical groups in 2014 and 15. So since for 8 years, Ukrainian army is essentially fighting with Russian army because whoever was buying into major media assets, who unfortunately inadvertently were reverberating Russian disinformation, one could kind of buy into this idea that there were some kind of separatists in Ukrainian East. So in essence, there were no separatists in there. From the very beginning, it was Russian army in more or less full force, everything but Russian Air Force and Russian ICBMs. So essentially, Ukrainian army was at war with Russia for 8 years. Then the front line essentially stabilized. The warfare became more stable in terms of it wasn't fluid. However, it was active with all the shelling and sniper warfare and drone and electronic warfare. And now we just have this continuation of that war because Russia couldn't achieve its um, objectives via diplomatic coercion. Ukraine stood its ground, it didn't yield to Russian demands, which were wrapped up in a diplomatic, nice envelope. It didn't work for Russia, so Russia just